Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wisconsin in Focus, powered by the Center Square. I'm Dan McCaleb, executive editor of the Center Square Newswire service. Joining me again today is the Center Square's Wisconsin correspondent, Benjamin Yount. How are you, Ben?
I cannot believe that we are done with September. October is next month. Halloween is around the corner pretty soon. Yeah. We're going to be talking about Christmas. I'm going to have to get the beard dye. I paint the beard every year to go as Santa Claus. So, in fact, if it's going to be cool enough, maybe I'll do that as my Halloween costume. Thanks, Dan. Good looking out for me, buddy.
Anytime, Ben. Two things there on my end, though. You also referenced Christmas. I was in Walmart this past weekend, and they have rows and rows and rows dedicated to Christmas decorations. I couldn't believe it. I had to take a photo of some of it, send it to my family, and saying, can you believe it's still September? I know it's almost October, still September, and we've got Christmas stuff everywhere. When it comes to Halloween, unfortunately, it's not my favorite holiday. It is my wife's favorite holiday. She's into horror movies. So this is the time of the year where I have to suffer through that.
Well, we feel you. We feel you. Our thoughts and prayers are with you during this difficult time.
I appreciate that, Ben. Listen, there are debates going on in states across the country about whether children who identify as transgender should be able to receive gender-affirming care, including sex change surgeries. Wisconsin, of course, is not immune from these debates. Republicans in the state legislature have introduced measures that would ban any surgery that results in sterilization, a mastectomy, puberty-blocking drugs, other hormone treatments for children. Of course, there is opposition to those proposals. You wrote about it this week at thecentersquare.com. Ben, tell us what's going on.
Yeah, this was probably inevitable, right? And I think that you're going to see this in most states where you have the kind of ideological divide. The difference in Wisconsin is our ideological divide is also part of divided government. Now, in Illinois, there is a Democratic-led legislature. There is a Democratic governor. There is a liberal-leaning Supreme Court. Democrats check all of the boxes. Republicans in Illinois can propose anything they want, and it's really not going to go anywhere. In Iowa, you have a Republican governor, a Republican-controlled legislature, a conservative-leaning court. It's the exact same, only on the opposite side of the ideological spectrum. In Wisconsin, you have a Republican-controlled legislature and almost a veto-proof Republican-controlled legislature. You have a Democratic governor and you now have a liberal-leaning Supreme Court. So when you have these ideological differences, when you have legislation that comes from 1,000% someone's ideological standpoint as opposed to, hey, there ought to be a law that school buses stop at train tracks. Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. This is something that is so part of the culture war that it's going to spill out into Wisconsin government. And this was inevitable. This is a plan from Dewey Strobel, Scott Allen, and the Republican Assembly Speaker, Robin Vos, who we quote all three of these men constantly over at the Center Square because they are some of the leaders of the Republican legislature. And they want to, exactly as you said, put a ban on what is generally referred to as gender-affirming care for children. Anyone under 18. That's a huge part of this conversation because the suggestions from Representative Allen are that kids are too young to make decisions about having surgeries that will alter their bodies and alter their lives. The quote that we have in the piece: there are too many studies that show the harm of these procedures, and there are too many stories of young people regretting their transition later. We need to help minors by giving them the inherent blessing of time. And he says, look, we don't let 12-year-olds get tattoos. We don't let 12-year-olds go and buy smokes or beers. You have to protect children, as he says it. The LGBTQ plus caucus in the legislature, which is growing by the day, takes the opposite view and says that these Republicans, this plan trying to get in between parents and children and doctors. And the quote that we used from their statement, once again, Republicans are interfering with private medical decisions that belong in the hands of patients and their doctors, not politicians. Gender-affirming care can reduce gender dysphoria and helps people live healthy and authentic lives, they said in an open letter that they released earlier this week. There are all manners of debates over science that we as just simple state house correspondents are not in the position to delve into. But this does come among the backdrop of two things. One, Milwaukee County adopted a resolution last week to declare themselves a sanctuary for gender-affirming care. And that essentially requests that the sheriff's department, if there were to be a ban on gender-affirming care, make enforcing that ban the lowest priority. It's a resolution. It is mainly meant to send a message and not have any real force of law. You also have, in school district after school district, school boards adopting gender policies that say you can transition if your parents say it's okay. That comes in response to schools in Eau Claire and Madison and some other liberal-leaning or progressive-leaning cities where school districts there are welcoming children to transition without their parents' permission. So this is part of the debate over how to deal with trans issues in Wisconsin. This is the first legislation that we have seen. And this is, as you said, not going to be resolved anytime soon. And because of divided government here in Wisconsin, this is something that will likely be Pyrrhic victories for both sides.
Ben, I do have feelings about this. I'm not going to share them here. We try to keep our own opinions out of this as best we can. But what amazes me is, just 2-3 years ago, this was not a topic of conversation in state legislatures, at least not as widespread, anywhere near as widespread as it is now. This sort of issue has come out of the woodworks, and it's not just dominating in some states discussions in state legislatures. I'll give you the closing word, Ben.
Well, and that's why you're seeing so many of these pieces of legislation. I've talked to lawmakers about this, and they say, look, we never thought we would have to spell this out. We never thought we would have to have a law that says don't do this. We never thought we would have to have a law that says, hey, teachers, you really should tell mom and dad if John wants to become Jane and is wearing a dress at school. So many of these issues when it comes to trans kids and schools and surgeries and pills and doctors, lawmakers never thought this was going to be something that they had to legislate because you said it. Up until 2-3 years ago, this wasn't a thing. And because there is zero middle ground on this, that's when you have to go to lawmakers. And this is part of the sausage making of politics, of governing, is that sometimes you do have to get into the weeds, and getting into the weeds on this issue is going to be kind of uncomfortable for an awful lot of people, and you're going to see votes on things that lawmakers never thought they were going to ever have to vote on.
Yeah, I hear you, Ben, and this is an issue that is not going to go away in Wisconsin and many other states, but that is all the time we have. Listeners can keep up with this ongoing debate at thecentersquare.com. For Ben Yount, I'm Dan McCaleb. Please subscribe, and thank you for listening.